A 7-year-old girl runs desperately through the rainy streets of downtown, chased by a sinister man in a leather jacket who wants to take her to a very bad place. In total panic, she spots a well-dressed millionaire about to get into his luxury car and urgently whispers, "Please, sir, pretend to be my father. The man following me wants to hurt me." When the businessman looks back and sees the threatening figure approaching, something inside him awakens. The rain hammered down on the downtown streets like furious tears from the sky, turning the asphalt into dark mirrors reflecting the neon glow of storefronts. Helena ran, her heart pounding in her chest, her soaked sneakers splashing through puddles as the weight of her battered backpack thudded against her thin back. At 7 years old, she had already learned that the world could be cruel, but nothing had prepared her for the last 3 days of relentless pursuit. The man in the leather jacket remained 2 blocks away, a persistent shadow who had been following her since Tuesday. Helena felt his eyes like cold knives piercing her back, and the acrid scent of stale cigarette smoke that emanated from him seemed to cling to her clothes, even when she managed to hide for a few hours. Her mother always said she had a special gift for reading people, an intuition that kept her safe when well-dressed adults hid dark intentions behind fake smiles. "I need to find someone," she murmured to herself, dodging hurried pedestrians who barely noticed her presence. "Someone different, someone who can help me." It was then that she saw him. A tall man emerged from an office building, wearing an impeccable suit that contrasted dramatically with the wet chaos of the street. His Italian leather shoes gleamed even in the rain, and he held an executive briefcase, with the same precision with which he held his silver cell phone. Alexander Thorne was known in business circles as a man who turned numbers into fortunes. But Helena saw something more. An invisible armor he wore to keep the world at a distance. Their eyes met for an instant. Alexander was about to step into his black sedan when he felt a soft touch on his sleeve. He turned to find a small, drenched girl with brown hair plastered to her face and large eyes that shone with a mixture of intelligence and pure terror. "Please, sir," Helena whispered with urgency, her words coming out in nervous bursts. "Pretend you're my dad. The man following me wants to hurt me." Alexander froze. In his 42 years of life, he had built emotional walls so high that few could truly touch him. His business success came precisely from this ability to maintain distance, to make decisions based on cold logic, never on emotional impulses. But something in the girl's desperation pierced his defenses like a bolt of lightning through glass. Instinctively, he followed her gaze. 50 yards away, a burly man in a black leather jacket was approaching with determined steps. His eyes were small and calculating, and there was a cruelty in his expression that made Alexander's blood run cold. The protective instinct he had buried decades ago awoke with brutal force. Without hesitation, Alexander stooped and scooped Helena into his arms, feeling how light she was, as if made of air and sheer determination. She trembled against his chest, and he could feel her tiny, bird-like heart beating erratically. "Hey!" he shouted at the jacketed man, his voice taking on a tone of authority that had intimidated CEOs in countless boardrooms. "Step away from my daughter!" The pursuer stopped abruptly, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. Alexander held his gaze firm, every fiber of his being radiating a determination that surprised even himself. For long seconds, the two men stared at each other through the curtain of rain, a silent battle of wills. Finally, the man in the jacket retreated, vanishing into the crowd like a shadow dissolving in the storm. Helena collapsed in tears on Alexander's shoulder, her small hands clutching his expensive suit as if he were the only solid thing in a world that was crumbling. "He almost got me," she sobbed against his neck. "Thank you for saving me." Alexander looked at the trembling girl in his arms and knew, with a certainty that shook him to his bones, that his life had changed forever in those few minutes of rain and desperation. Alexander sat Helena in the leather seat of his sedan, immediately turning on the heater as he watched the girl shiver in her drenched clothes. His analytical mind, trained to solve complex problems, struggled to process the extraordinary situation he found himself in. He had never dealt with children, and certainly had never been involved in situations that completely escaped his meticulous control. "What's your name?" he asked softly, trying to modulate his naturally authoritative voice into something more welcoming. "Helena," she replied, wiping her nose with her wet sleeve. "Helena Silver, and you're very kind, sir." Alexander Thorne." He hesitated before continuing. "Helena, where are your parents? I need to take you home." The girl's face shuttered like a flower touched by frost. She looked away to the fogged window, where the city lights blurred into colorful streaks through the relentless rain. "I don't have a fixed home," she murmured, her voice so low that Alexander had to lean in to hear. "I've been on the streets for a few weeks, ever since my mom disappeared." The words hit Alexander like a punch to the gut. His orderly life, filled with scheduled meetings and calculated decisions, had not prepared him for the raw reality of a child abandoned to her own devices on the dangerous city streets. "Disappeared how?" he asked. Though part of him already dreaded the answer, Helena finally faced him, and Alexander saw an unsettling wisdom in her young eyes. "My mom was a journalist. She always said I was her little detective because I noticed things adults ignored. In the last few weeks before she vanished, she was really nervous, always looking over her shoulder, getting strange phone calls at night." Alexander felt a chill that had nothing to do with the car's temperature. "And the man who was following you, he showed up 3 days after my mom disappeared. First he just stayed across the street watching. Then he started following me to the places I hide to sleep. Last night, he tried to grab me when I was looking for food near the municipal market." The revelation left Alexander silent for a few moments. His company had dealt with delicate situations involving confidential information, but never anything that put lives at risk, especially the life of an innocent child. "Helena, has this man told you what he wants?" She shook her head, but Alexander noticed the hesitation in her eyes. "Not exactly, but I heard him talking on the phone yesterday. He said the girl knows too much, and that she needs to be silenced before she causes trouble." Alexander felt his breath quicken. The situation was more serious than he had initially imagined. It wasn't just a stranger chasing a vulnerable child, but something much more sinister and organized. "Where have you been sleeping?" he asked, already formulating a plan in his mind. "In different places, parking garages, under storefront awnings, sometimes in abandoned buildings. I learned I can't stay in the same place 2 nights in a row, or they find me." The word "they" echoed in Alexander's mind like an alarm bell. Helena had used the plural, which meant there were more people involved in the pursuit. "You said they. How many people are following you?" Helena bit her lower lip, a gesture Alexander recognized as a sign she was deciding how much she could trust him. "At least 3 I've seen. The man in the leather jacket is the most persistent, but there's a blonde woman who shows up sometimes, and an older man in a gray suit who's always in different cars." Alexander ran a hand through his hair, a rare display of agitation for someone so meticulously controlled. The situation was proving to be far more complex and dangerous than any business challenge he had ever faced. "Helena, I need to ask you something very important. Did your mother leave anything with you? Papers, flash drives, anything these people might want?" The girl's eyes lit up with a mixture of fear and determination that Alexander was beginning to recognize as characteristic of Helena. "She gave me this before she disappeared," she whispered, pulling a small golden key from inside her wet backpack. "She said, if anything happened to her, I should guard this key, as if my life depended on it." Alexander looked at the key glinting in Helena's small palm and knew instinctively that this small metal object was the reason a 7-year-old girl was being hunted on the streets like a wild animal. Alexander drove for 40 minutes through the city's illuminated streets, constantly checking his rearview mirror to make sure they weren't being followed. Helena had fallen asleep in the passenger seat, her face still marked by tension even in sleep. From time to time, she murmured inaudible words, and Alexander realized that even her dreams offered her no peace. His penthouse apartment on the 30th floor of a luxury residential building had always been his personal sanctuary, a meticulously organized environment where every object had its specific place. The glass walls offered a panoramic view of the city, and the minimalist furniture reflected his controlled and disciplined personality. He had never imagined he would one day bring a child into that space which represented his need for order and solitude. "Helena," he called softly, touching her shoulder when the elevator reached the top floor. "We're here." She woke with a start, her eyes darting quickly around the room as she assessed possible threats and escape routes. Alexander realized that this reaction was the result of weeks of living in constant alert and felt a pang in his chest, imagining what such a small child had faced alone. "Is it safe here?" Helena asked, clutching her backpack to her chest. "Yes. There's building security, cameras on every floor, and only I have access to this apartment." As they entered, Helena stayed close to the door, her eyes scanning every detail of the environment. Alexander noticed how she mentally catalogued the exits, the windows, the places she could hide if necessary. That sharp observational ability was impressive for someone her age, but it also broke his heart to realize she had developed these skills out of pure necessity for survival. "You must be hungry," Alexander said, heading to the immaculate kitchen, which he rarely used for anything beyond a morning espresso. "I don't want to be a bother," Helena replied automatically, but her empty stomach betrayed her words with an audible rumble. Alexander smiled for the first time in hours. "It's no bother. When was the last time you had a full meal?" Helena lowered, her eyes clearly embarrassed. "The day before yesterday, I found some fruit a vendor threw out. It was still good." The devastating simplicity of that confession hit Alexander like a physical blow. His refrigerator was full of expensive foods that often went bad because he preferred to dine in sophisticated restaurants or order food delivered by apps. The discrepancy between his unconscious waste and Helena's real hunger made him question many of his priorities. As he prepared sandwiches and heated some soup, Alexander watched Helena cautiously exploring the living room. She approached the bookcase, trailing her fingers along the spines as if they were precious treasures. "Do you like to read?" he asked. "My mum taught me. She said books are doors to worlds where we can be safe, even when the real world isn't." Helena pulled out a volume of classic fairy tales. "She always read to me before bed, even on the hardest nights." Alexander felt a lump in his throat. "And how long ago exactly did she disappear?" 3 weeks and 2 days, Helena replied immediately, as if she had counted every hour since then. "She went out for an important meeting and said she'd be back for dinner. She left money for pizza and told me not to open the door for anyone. I waited 2 days before going out to look for her." "Did you try going to the police?" Helena shook her head vigorously. "My mom always said there are bad people even in places that are supposed to be safe. She taught me to trust only my gut and people who show true kindness, not just pretty words." Alexander served the food and watched Helena eat politely, but also with the desperate hunger of someone who didn't know when her next meal would be. Between spoonfuls of soup, she continued talking, and Alexander was impressed by her articulation and maturity. "Mr. Thorne, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "Why did you help me? Most rich adults I see on the street pretend kids like me don't exist." The question caught him off guard. Alexander struggled to find an honest answer. I don't know how to explain it completely. When I saw the fear in your eyes and that man approaching, something inside me reacted instinctively." Helena studied him with those perceptive eyes. "You felt lonely and scared before too, haven't you?" The girl's observation was like a beam of light illuminating dark corners of his soul that Alexander had sealed off decades ago. He had built his identity around control and self-sufficiency, but Helena had identified the deep loneliness he hid behind material success. "Yes," he admitted finally, "I have felt that way." Helena nodded with wisdom beyond her years. "Wounded people recognize other wounded people. My mom taught me that." In that moment, Alexander realized that saving Helena could be the first step to saving himself from a life of emotional isolation that he had chosen as protection, but which had become a golden prison. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside that apartment, two solitary souls had found temporary refuge in each other. Alexander woke before dawn, a habit developed over decades of building his business empire. He found Helena still sleeping, on the couch, wrapped in the cashmere blanket he had offered her the night before. She looked so small and vulnerable that he felt a protective wave sweep over his chest, a strange and powerful feeling that destabilized him. While making coffee, Alexander reflected on the available options. His strategic mind, accustomed to solving complex problems, worked to find the best solution for Helena. The most obvious answer seemed to be finding a suitable shelter where she could be safe while authorities investigated her mother's disappearance. "Good morning," Helena said softly, appearing in the kitchen with messy hair and still sleepy eyes. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "Better than in weeks," she admitted, accepting the glass of warm milk Alexander offered. "Thank you for letting me stay here." Alexander sat at the dining table watching Helena drink the milk in small, careful sips. "Helena, we need to talk about what to do next. I can't leave you on the streets, but I also can't ignore that you need proper care and official protection." Helena's face immediately shut down, and Alexander saw fear return to her eyes. "Are you going to take me to a shelter? There's a very good place in the city with trained professionals and—" "No!" Helena interrupted, standing up so quickly that she knocked over her chair. "Please, Mr. Thorne, you don't understand. They always find me in official places." Alexander was perplexed by the girl's intense reaction. "What do you mean they find you?" Helena began pacing back and forth, her small hands gesturing nervously. "In the first week after my mum disappeared, I tried to go to 2 different shelters. Every time, the next day, the man in the leather jacket would show up nearby. Once, he even talked to one of the social workers, saying he was my uncle and looking for me." The revelation was like a cold splash of reality. Alexander realized that the network pursuing Helena was far more sophisticated than he had imagined. They had informants or access to systems that allowed them to track movements through official channels. "That means there's someone inside the system working with them," Alexander murmured, more to himself than to Helena. "Exactly," she confirmed, demonstrating once again her unsettling ability to grasp complex situations. "My mum always said that when you can't trust the system, you have to be smarter than it." Alexander ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the responsibility he had taken on. His meticulously organized life did not include plans to protect a child from a conspiracy that extended even to supposedly safe institutions. "So what do you suggest?" he asked, surprising himself by asking for advice from a 7-year-old girl. Helena approached him, her eyes shining with a determination that contrasted with her age. "We can find out what this key opens. My mom wouldn't give me something important for no good reason. If we find out what she was investigating, maybe we can understand why these people want me so badly." Alexander studied the golden key Helena had shown him the night before. It was small and delicate, clearly made to open something specific, not a common door. "It could be a safe, a cabinet, a special drawer," Alexander mused aloud. "Or maybe something at my mom's workplace," Helena suggested. She worked for the Metropolitan Ledger, but sometimes she did independent investigations. At home, Alexander felt a chill of recognition. The Metropolitan Ledger was known for its courageous investigative reports, often exposing corruption at high levels of government and influential corporations. If Helena's mother was working on something dangerous enough to result in her disappearance, the implications were terrifying. "Helena, where did you two live? We had a small apartment in the St. Jude district, but I'm scared to go back there. In the first few nights, I saw strange cars parked on the street, men watching the building." Alexander made a decision he knew would change his life forever. "Then we'll find out together, but my way. I'll hire discreet private investigators, people I trust. We can't use official channels if there's infiltration in the system." Helena looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. "You're really going to help me, even knowing it might be dangerous?" Alexander knelt in front of her, gently placing his hands on her small shoulders. "Helena, since last night something has changed in me. I won't abandon you. We're going to find out what happened to your mom and make sure you stay safe." For the first time since they met, Helena smiled genuinely, but they both knew they were about to embark on a dangerous journey that would test not only their courage, but also the strength of the unexpected bond that had formed between them. Outside, the day dawned cloudy, as if the city itself sensed the approaching storms. Alexander spent the morning making discreet calls from his private office in the apartment, while Helena explored his extensive library. His first call was to Robert Hayes, a former police officer who had become a private investigator after becoming disillusioned with corruption within the force. Rob had helped Alexander with sensitive corporate matters in the past and was one of the few people he trusted completely. "Rob, I need your help with something very sensitive," Alexander said as soon as the investigator answered. "Of course, Alexander, what's it about? I can't talk over the phone. Can you come to my apartment this afternoon? And Rob, this involves a child in real danger." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Rob had 2 young children, and Alexander knew that any threat against a child would deeply touch his paternal instincts. "I'll be there in 2 hours, Rob replied without further questions. The second call was to Maria Rodriguez, his executive assistant for over 10 years. Maria was more than an employee. She had become his confidant in personal and professional matters, one of the few people capable of penetrating his emotional armor. "Maria, I need you to clear my schedule for the next few days." "All of it? Alexander, you have the meeting with the Japanese investors tomorrow. Cancel everything. And Maria, this is confidential. I don't want anyone to know my location or agenda." Maria sensed the urgency in his voice. "Is everything all right? You never cancel important meetings." "I'll explain in person. Can you come here this afternoon along with Rob?" "Of course, we'll arrive together." While Alexander made the arrangements, Helena approached, carrying a thick book on civil law. "Mr. Thorne, can I ask you a question?" "Always." "If someone discovers information about important crimes, but the normal authorities can't be trusted, is there another way to report it?" Alexander stopped typing and looked at Helena, impressed once again by her perceptiveness. "Why do you ask?" Because I've been thinking about what my mom might have discovered. She always said that some truths are so dangerous that only certain brave people can handle them. Did your mom talk about her work with you? Helena nodded, sitting in the armchair next to Alexander's desk. Not details, but she taught me about justice and courage. She said that sometimes good people have to take risks to protect other good people. Alexander felt a wave of respect for Helena's mother. Raising a daughter about moral principles while facing real dangers demonstrated extraordinary strength of character. To answer your question, yes, there are special prosecutors, human rights organizations, investigative journalists from other outlets. The key is to choose people who have enough protection to face pressure and threats. Helena absorbed the information, clearly processing possibilities. Do you know people like that? Some, Alexander admitted. But first we need to find out exactly what your mom was investigating. In the afternoon, Rob and Maria arrived almost simultaneously. Rob was a man of medium height, with graying hair and alert eyes that missed no detail. Maria, an elegant woman in her mid-40s, always exuded efficiency and unwavering loyalty. When Alexander introduced Helena, the reactions were immediate and telling. Rob knelt down to her level, his paternal instincts instantly activated. Maria was visibly moved, her own experiences as a single mother surfacing in her protective expression. "Tell us everything," Rob said after Alexander explained the basic situation. Helena, demonstrating her impressive maturity once again, told her story with precise details, including physical descriptions of the pursuers and the exact chronology of events. Rob took careful notes, occasionally asking questions that revealed his investigative experience. "This network is professional," Rob concluded after hearing everything. "They have resources, informants, and organization. They're not common criminals." Maria held Helena's hand as she listened. "That key could be crucial. Do you remember your mom mentioning safes, special files, anywhere she kept important documents?" Helena closed her eyes, concentrating. "She had an office at home, but also—" Wait, her eyes snapped open. "She once mentioned having a safe place where dangerous truths sleep until they can awaken." I thought it was just her poetic way of speaking. Rob and Alexander exchanged significant glances. "That sounds like a bank safety deposit box," Rob said. "Many investigative journalists use that kind of protection for sensitive evidence." Maria nodded. "And if she gave the key to Helena, it means she trusted her daughter to know what to do if something happened." Alexander felt a mixture of admiration and sadness, imagining the weight Helena's mother had placed on her daughter's small shoulders. But he also recognized the wisdom of that decision. Helena was extraordinarily intelligent and brave for her age. "So our next step is to identify which bank and locate the safety deposit box," Alexander concluded. Rob closed his notebook. "That could take time. And while we investigate, Helena needs to remain completely off the radar. They'll intensify the search when they realize she's no longer on the streets." Helena looked at Alexander with a trust that deeply moved him. "Will you really protect me until we find my mom?" "Yes," Alexander replied without hesitation. "All of us will." In that moment, Alexander realized he had found more than just a child to protect. He had found an unexpected family united by a common purpose to seek justice and truth in a dangerous world. 3 days had passed since Rob and Maria joined the mission to protect Helena and uncover the truth about her mother's disappearance. Alexander's apartment had transformed into an improvised operations center, with city maps spread across the dining table and photos of possible suspects tacked to the office walls. Helena had adapted to the routine with an ease that simultaneously impressed and worried Alexander. She woke early, helped Maria organize investigation, documents, and asked insightful questions that often led to important discoveries. Her ability to recall specific details about the last days with her mother was proving fundamental to piecing together the puzzle. "Rob found something," Maria announced, entering the apartment with a tense expression. "It's not good news." Alexander and Helena approached as Rob opened his laptop on the coffee table. His research in recent days had focused on identifying Helena's pursuers and tracing her mother's last movements. "I managed to identify the man in the leather jacket," Rob said, showing a photo on the screen. "Name Carl Miller, ex-military, currently works as a private security contractor for companies that, let's just say, they don't ask questions about methods." Helena studied the photo and nodded grimly. "That's him, it's definitely him. Even worse," Rob continued. "I discovered that the company employing him has connections to influential politicians and businessmen who have been targets of journalistic investigations in the past." Alexander felt a knot in his stomach. That means Helena's mother's work targeted very powerful people. Exactly, and there's more. Rob clicked to the next screen. "I managed to access phone records from the Metropolitan Ledger's newsroom in the last week before Helena's mum disappeared. She made several calls to a number belonging to a lawyer specializing in witness protection." Helena instinctively held Alexander's hand. "Does that mean my mum knew she was in danger?" Maria knelt beside Helena, her voice soft but serious. "Honey, it seems your mom was trying to protect herself and protect you. She knew she had uncovered something very important and dangerous." "But there's something more troubling," Rob said, hesitating before continuing. "Last night they started asking questions about you on the streets, Alexander." Alexander's blood ran cold. "What kind of questions?" "Your habits, your routine, where you live. Someone is trying to locate you. They found out you helped Helena. And now you're a target too." Alexander ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Helena had already learned to recognize as a sign of his deep concern. "How did they find out?" "Probably security cameras on the street where you met," Rob explained. "They must have access to the city's surveillance systems." Helena stood up abruptly, walking to the window that offered a panoramic view of the city. Alexander followed her, realizing she was fighting back tears. "Helena, what are you thinking? I ruined your life," she said with a trembling voice. "You were safe before you helped me. Now you're in danger because of me." Alexander knelt beside her, gently turning her face so their eyes met. "Helena, look at me. You didn't ruin anything. You gave me something I didn't know I was missing." "What?" "A purpose. A reason to use my resources and privileges for something that truly matters." Alexander smiled sadly. "My life was empty before I met you. I had success, money, but I had no meaning." Maria approached, carrying a cup of hot tea for Helena. "Alexander's right, honey, and now we're a team. We all chose to be here." Rob closed his laptop and joined the group. "Speaking of team, we need to make some important decisions. The situation is escalating, and they clearly have resources we underestimated." "What kind of decisions?" Alexander asked. "First, this apartment is no longer safe. They'll locate it eventually. Second, we need to accelerate our investigation into the key before they find us." Helena took a sip of the tea, her small hands trembling slightly. "I remembered something last night. My mum once mentioned she had friends in high places who would help her if she needed to disappear for a while." Alexander and Rob exchanged significant glances. "Could that mean she planned her own disappearance?" Maria asked. "It's possible," Rob said. "Investigative journalists sometimes have to go into hiding when they uncover information too dangerous to publish immediately." Helena brightened for the first time in days. "So she might be alive, just hiding?" "It's a real possibility." Alexander confirmed, feeling a pang of hope. "But it also means the people pursuing her know she's alive and want you as a way to force her out of hiding. The realization hit everyone simultaneously. Helena was not just a witness or carrier of important information. She was bait in an elaborate trap to capture her mother. "They want my mom to come save me," Helena murmured, her voice laced with devastating understanding. Rob nodded gravely. "And when she shows up, they'll have both of them." The silence that followed was charged with tension and determination. Everyone realized they weren't just protecting Helena. They were in a race against time to find her mother before the IA pursuers could use the daughter as a trap. Outside, the city lights began to flicker in the growing darkness, and Alexander had the unsettling feeling that they were like hostile eyes watching their every move. The discovery happened completely unexpectedly on Friday morning, when Rob returned to the apartment with an expression Alexander had never seen before. A mixture of shock, rage, and disbelief that instantly made his blood run cold. "We need to talk," Rob said, looking significantly at Helena, who was helping Maria catalog clues in the office. "In private." Alexander followed Rob to the kitchen, sensing that whatever Rob had discovered would change everything irreversibly. "Alexander," Rob began, his voice low and tense, "do you know Marcus Sterling, your partner of 15 years? Of course, Marcus is my right-hand man. We built the company together. Why?" Rob pulled a folder of documents from his backpack, his hands trembling slightly. "Because Marcus Sterling is directly involved in the network pursuing Helena." The words hit Alexander like a lightning bolt. He leaned against the kitchen counter, feeling as if the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. "That's impossible. Marcus is your best friend, I know," Rob interrupted. "But look at this." Rob opened the folder, revealing high-quality photographs showing Marcus in secret meetings with Carl Miller, the man in the leather jacket who was pursuing Helena. There were also bank records showing substantial transfers from accounts linked to Alexander's company to organizations Rob had identified as fronts for illegal activities. "There's more," Rob continued, his voice heavy with regret at having to shatter Alexander's life. "I managed to intercept a phone conversation last night. Marcus was coordinating the search for you and Helena. He knows exactly where you are." Alexander felt as if he was drowning in betrayal. Marcus had been more than a partner. He was his confidant, the person he trusted most in the business world. They had built an empire together, shared successes and failures, celebrated achievements, and faced crises side by side. "Why would he do this?" Alexander whispered, his voice almost inaudible. "Money and power," Rob replied brutally. "The evidence shows that for years, Marcus had been using your company to launder money from illegal operations. When Helena's mother started investigating this network, she inevitably uncovered the connections to your company. The revelation was like an emotional avalanche. Alexander realized that his entire life had been built on a foundation of lies. His success, his wealth, his reputation, everything was contaminated by Marcus's criminal activities. "Helena," Alexander murmured, the realization hitting him like a second blow. "She's in danger because I brought her into the wolf's den." "No," Rob said firmly. "You saved her life that day in the rain. Without your protection, they would have caught her long ago." Alexander struggled to process the implications. "Marcus has access to all my security systems, knows all my hiding places, has keys to the apartment." "Exactly. And worse, he's probably monitoring your communications, your bank accounts, your movements. You need to get out of here immediately." At that moment, Helena appeared in the kitchen doorway, her perceptive eyes instantly catching the tension in the room. "Did something bad happen?" she asked, demonstrating once again her ability to read complex adult situations. Alexander knelt in front of her, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Helena," We found out who's behind the pursuit of your mother and you. Who? Someone very close to me, someone I trusted completely. Alexander took a deep breath. This means our situation is more dangerous than we thought. Helena studied his face with that unsettling wisdom. Is that why you look so sad? Because you were betrayed by someone you loved. The devastating simplicity of the observation broke Alexander's last emotional defenses. Tears he'd suppressed for decades finally welled in his eyes. Yes, he admitted, and it means I put you in even more danger by trying to protect you. Helena came closer and surprisingly hugged Alexander tightly. Mr. Thorne, sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who hurt us the most. My mom taught me that, but she also taught me that it doesn't mean we should stop trusting good people. Maria appeared in the kitchen, immediately sensing that something dramatic had happened. What did we find out? Rob quickly brought her up to speed. Maria was visibly shaken, but her practical nature prevailed. Then we need to get out of here now and find a place completely off Marcus's radar, she said. I have a rustic cabin I inherited from my grandmother. No one knows about it, not even my family. Alexander stood up, wiping his eyes and forcing his strategic mind to regain control. Marcus's betrayal was devastating, but Helena needed protection, and he couldn't allow himself to crumble. Rob, how much time do we have before Marcus realizes we found out? Maybe a few hours. He'll notice when you don't show up for your meetings today. Helena held Alexander's hand, her small, warm hand conveying surprising strength. We're going to find my mom, aren't we? Alexander looked at the brave girl who had transformed his life in a few days and felt a fierce determination swell in his chest. Marcus had betrayed his trust and destroyed his life, but he wouldn't destroy the unexpected family Alexander had found. Yes, he said with renewed conviction, we're going to find your mom, and we're going to make these people pay for all the harm they've caused. As they quickly packed only the essentials, Alexander realized that Marcus's betrayal, however painful, had liberated something within him, the courage to truly fight for something that mattered, regardless of the personal cost. Marina's rustic cabin was nestled among green hills 2 hours from the city, a retreat that contrasted dramatically with Alexander's luxurious apartment. The stone and wood structure exuded simplicity and warmth, surrounded by wild gardens that Helena explored with fascination as soon as they arrived. Alexander watched the girl run among the wildflowers, noticing how her expression had softened for the first time in days. Marcus's betrayal had deeply shaken his emotional foundations, but seeing Helena find moments of joy, even amidst the chaos, gave him strength to continue. She seems more like a child here, Maria observed, joining Alexander on the wooden porch. As Rob checked the property's security systems, it's hard to remember she's only 7, Alexander agreed. Circumstances forced her to grow up very quickly. Maria studied Alexander's profile, noting the lines of tension that had deepened since the discovery about Marcus. And you? How are you handling all of this? Alexander sighed heavily. 15 years of partnership, Maria. 15 years building something I thought was legitimate, only to find out it was being used as a front for crimes. I feel like an idiot. Marcus was too smart at hiding his activities, Maria said gently. You couldn't have known. But I should have known, Alexander retorted bitterly. What kind of businessman am I if I didn't realize my own partner was using our company for money laundering? Rob approached, having overheard the last part of the conversation. Alexander, people like Marcus are experts at manipulation. They build relationships based on trust, specifically to exploit that trust. Helena ran back to the porch, her cheeks flushed from the cool mountain air. I found a small creek back there. It has shiny pebbles at the bottom. How wonderful, Maria said, smiling genuinely for the first time in days. Do you want me to make some snacks for us to take there? While Maria prepared sandwiches, Alexander sat with Helena on the porch steps. The child had become his emotional anchor, her presence constantly reminding him of what truly mattered. "Mr. Thorne," Helena said softly, "are you very sad because of the man who betrayed you?" Alexander considered lying, protecting her from the complexity of his adult emotions, but Helena deserved honesty. "Yes, I'm very sad, and also angry, but mostly I feel lost." "Why?" "Because my whole life was built around the company I created with Marcus. Now I don't know who I am without it." Helena picked up a small flower that had fallen on the step, twirling it between her small fingers. "My mom once told me that we aren't what we do or what we have. We are what we choose to do when things get hard." The wisdom of that observation hit Alexander like a beam of light amidst the darkness of his emotional confusion. "Your mom is a very wise woman. She'll be proud of me when she finds out I managed to find someone so good to help me," Helena said, leaning her head on Alexander's shoulder. The simple gesture broke something within Alexander's chest. For the first time in his life, he felt truly needed, not for his money or business connections, but for his fundamental humanity. Rob returned from his inspection of the property with mixed news. The good news is that this place is truly isolated and safe. The bad news is that Marcus is escalating the search. My contacts in the police said he filed a missing persons report for Helena and implicated you as a kidnapping suspect. Alexander's blood ran cold. "He's using the legal system against us?" "Exactly. And because he has resources and connections, he's able to mobilize legitimate authorities who don't know the real situation." Helena stood up abruptly, her small hands clenched into determined fists. "He can't do that. Mr. Thorne saved me." "I know, honey," Rob said gently. "But Marcus is using the law to his advantage, making it even harder for us to seek official help." Maria returned with a picnic basket, but stopped when she noticed the renewed tension. "What happened now?" Alexander explained the situation as they walked toward the creek Helena had discovered. The crystal-clear water flowed over smooth stones, creating a soft sound that contrasted with the turbulence of their lives. "So we're running not just from criminals, but from the police too," Maria summarized, sitting on a large rock. "Not the real police," Rob clarified, "but from officers who've been misled by Marcus and believe he's the victim." Helena knelt on the creek bank, watching the small fish swimming among the stones. "It's like when my mom told me about people who wear masks to look good on the outside, but are bad on the inside." Alexander joined her on the bank, impressed, once again by her ability to find perfect analogies for complex situations. "Exactly. Marcus always wore a mask with me. But now you can see his true face," Helena said, looking directly into Alexander's eyes. "And that means you can really fight him." Rob opened his laptop, balancing it carefully on a flat stone. "Speaking of fighting, I got more information about the key. I identified 3 banks in the city that use this specific type of key for safety deposit boxes." Helena immediately brightened. "Can we go check?" "Too dangerous right now," Rob said. "Marcus probably has people watching all the banks, waiting for you to show up." Alexander picked up the small key Helena always carried with her, studying it in the sunlight. "But if we don't find out what your mom hid, we'll never have enough evidence to expose Marcus and his network." "Maybe we can find another way," Maria suggested. "Helena, do you remember anything else your mom said about where she kept important things?" Helena closed her eyes, concentrating intensely. When she opened them, there was a spark of hope in her gaze. She once said that the most important truths are hidden, where the powerful never think to look. At the time, I thought she was talking about hiding things in simple places, not in expensive safes. Alexander and Rob exchanged intrigued glances. Perhaps the answer wasn't in a sophisticated bank, but somewhere much closer and more unexpected than they had imagined. On their second night at the rustic cabin, Helena woke up screaming. Alexander rushed to the room where she was sleeping, finding her sitting up in bed, trembling and drenched in cold sweat. Without hesitation, he wrapped his arms around her, feeling how tense her small body was from the terror of the nightmare. "It was just a dream," Alexander murmured, gently rocking her as he had seen parents do with their children. "You're safe here." "It wasn't a dream," Helena sobbed against his chest. "It was a memory. I remembered the last night with my mom." Maria appeared in the doorway, also woken by the screams. She sat on the bed on the other side of Helena, offering her a glass of warm water. "Do you want to tell us about it?" Maria asked softly. Helena drank the water in small sips, her hands still trembling. "My mom was very nervous that night. She stayed up very late, burning papers in the kitchen sink. I thought it was just regular trash, but now I remember she was crying as she burned them." Alexander felt a pang in his chest. "Did she say anything?" "She called me into her room and gave me the key. She said if anything happened, I should look for the place where we keep the dreams that can't die." Helena wiped her eyes. "At the time, I didn't understand, but now you remember something specific," Maria encouraged. Helena nodded slowly. "My mom had a small office at home, but there was another place, a secret place where she went when she wanted to be alone and think. She showed it to me once, but made me promise never to tell anyone." Alexander and Maria exchanged hopeful glances. Rob, who had appeared silently in the doorway, approached with renewed interest. "Where was this place?" Rob asked. It was a small hidden room behind a bookshelf in our building's library. My mom accidentally found out there was a false wall. She set up a small table there and said it was where writers keep stories too important to forget." The silence that followed was charged with possibilities. Alexander realized that Helena's mother had created a perfect hiding place. A place so simple and unexpected that no one would think to look there. "Helena," Alexander said carefully, "do you remember how to get to this secret room?" "Yes. The bookshelf had books on American history on the bottom shelf. You had to push a specific book about the civil rights movement to open the passage." Rob opened his laptop immediately. "I need to check if the building is still being watched. If Marcus knew about this hiding place, he would have already retrieved anything that was there. But he didn't know," Helena said with certainty. "My mom said the secret was just ours. Not even the librarian knew about the room." Maria stroked Helena's hair. "That means whatever your mom hid might still be there." Alexander felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. "But how are we going to get there without being detected? Marcus certainly has people watching the building where you lived. The library is on the ground floor and has a separate entrance," Helena explained. "My mum used to take me there on Saturday mornings when it was less busy." Rob was typing furiously. "I'm checking the building's security systems. If we can get in through the library during a specific time." "No," Alexander interrupted firmly. "It's too dangerous to take Helena back to the city. If something goes wrong." "But I need to go," Helena insisted, her voice taking on that determination Alexander already knew well. "Only I know exactly where to look. And if my mom left something important there, it might be the only way to save her." Maria took Helena's hands in hers. "Honey, we understand you want to help, but—" "You don't understand," Helena interrupted, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. "My mom might be dying out there while we talk. If she's hiding, she must be hurt or sick. Every day we spend without finding her might be one less day I have with her." The raw pain in Helena's voice pierced Alexander's heart. he recognized that desperation, the gnawing sense that every lost moment was critical. It was the same urgency he felt when making important business decisions, but multiplied by an emotional intensity he had never experienced. "Rob," Alexander said finally, "what kind of security does the building have?" "Basic security. Cameras at the main entrances, but the library has a side access that's less monitored." Rob hesitated. It would be risky, but not impossible. Helena held Alexander's arm. "Please, I know it's dangerous, but my mum risked everything to protect that information. I need to honor that courage." Alexander looked into those young eyes full of determination and courage, and saw reflections of himself when he used to face impossible business challenges. The difference was that Helena was fighting for love, not for profit. "Maria," Alexander said, his decision made, "you and Helena will stay here tomorrow. Rob and I will go into the city to scout the location." "No!" Helena protested. "You won't be able to find the room without me." "Then you will draw us a detailed map," Alexander said firmly. "And if we determine it's safe, we'll come back for you the next day." Helena frowned, clearly dissatisfied with the compromise, but realizing it was the best offer she would get. "Okay," she reluctantly agreed, "but promise you'll be very careful. I don't want to lose you too." The word "too" echoed in the silence of the room, reminding everyone that Helena had already lost so much in her few years of life. Alexander hugged her tighter, making a silent promise that he would not be another important person to disappear from her life. Outside, the mountain wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the promise that the next day would bring long-sought answers, or dangers even greater than they had faced so far. Alexander and Rob left for the city before dawn, leaving Maria and Helena in the relative safety of the rustic cabin. The detailed map Helena had drawn was folded in Alexander's jacket pocket, along with precise instructions written in her careful, childlike handwriting. During the 2-hour drive, Alexander battled a growing anxiety that had nothing to do with the risks of the mission. For the first time in his life, he was genuinely concerned with the well-being of another person above his own interests. The possibility of failing Helena, of not being able to find the evidence that could save her mother, weighed on his chest like a stone. "Are you okay?" Rob asked, noticing the tension in Alexander's face. "I'm thinking about Helena," Alexander admitted. "If something goes wrong today, if we get caught or worse, what will happen to her?" Rob drove in silence for a few moments before replying. "Alexander, do you realize you've become a father to this girl in less than a week?" The observation hit Alexander like a punch to the gut. "No, I'm trying to protect her." "You love her as if she were your daughter," Rob said gently, "and she loves you as if you were her father. Maria and I see it clearly." Alexander remained silent, processing the devastating truth of that observation. At some point between saving Helena in the rain and promising her they would find her mother, he had developed paternal feelings so intense that the idea of losing the girl was physically painful. "That makes everything harder," Alexander murmured. "Or clearer," Rob retorted. "Now you know exactly what you're fighting for." They arrived in Helena's old neighborhood, the St. Jude district, as the sun was rising, painting the old buildings with soft golden light. Rob parked 2 blocks from the residential building, and they walked cautiously through the streets that were beginning to wake up with commuters heading to their jobs. The building where Helena had lived was a modest, 6-story structure with a community library on the ground floor that served the entire neighborhood. Alexander observed the movement through the windows, noting that there were few people inside, mostly seniors reading newspapers, and a few mothers with small children. "There," Rob said discreetly, pointing to a man sitting on a bench across the street. "He's been reading a newspaper for 40 minutes, but his eyes check the building entrance every few seconds." Alexander followed Rob's gaze and immediately identified the alert posture that didn't match casual reading. Marcus really is watching the place. There's another one at the bakery on the corner, Rob continued, and probably more that we can't identify. Alexander felt frustration grow. They were so close to potentially finding answers, but Marcus's lookouts made any approach extremely dangerous. Maybe we can create a distraction, Alexander suggested. Rob shook his head. Too risky. If they recognize us, the entire operation will be compromised. It was then that Alexander had an idea that surprised him with its simplicity. Rob, do you have children Helena's age? I have an 8-year-old daughter. Why? Because I just realized something. These men are looking for me and Helena together, or for Helena alone. They're not expecting a different child to enter the library accompanied by her father. Rob understood immediately. You want me to bring my daughter to pretend to be Helena? Not Helena. Just a normal girl visiting the library with her dad. While they focus on checking if it's Helena, you can access the hiding place. Rob considered the idea carefully. It would be less suspicious than 2 adult men entering alone. But what if my daughter gets scared? You don't have to tell her about the danger. Just tell her it's a special adventure, looking for a hidden treasure. Rob grabbed his phone. My ex-wife lives 20 minutes from here. I can ask her to bring Sophia. While Rob made the arrangements, Alexander studied Helena's map once more. The instructions were incredibly detailed for a 7-year-old, each step described with precision, including visual landmarks that would help him navigate. The library. Sophia's on her way, Rob announced after hanging up. I told her it's a special detective game. 40 minutes later, a cheerful girl with curly hair came running towards Rob, followed by a woman who was clearly concerned about the mysterious nature of her ex-husband's request. Daddy! What adventure are we going on? Sophia asked, her eyes shining with excitement. Alexander watched the interaction between father and daughter, feeling a painful pang, thinking of Helena waiting anxiously at the rustic cabin. More than ever, he was determined to find the evidence that could reunite Helena with her mother. We're going to look for a very special treasure hidden in the library, Rob explained, kneeling down to Sophia's height. But it has to be our secret, okay? Sophia nodded vigorously, clearly delighted with the mysterious adventure. Alexander watched the lookouts across the street as Rob and Sophia approached the library entrance. The man on the bench looked up from his newspaper, briefly studied the father and daughter, and returned to reading, exactly as Alexander had predicted. Through the discreet radio he carried, Alexander heard Rob whisper, "We're inside, heading to the American history section." Alexander held his breath, knowing that the next few minutes would determine if they would find the answers Helena desperately needed, or if the entire mission would end in disaster, leaving a brave girl orphaned and possibly without her new, adoptive family too. I found the bookshelf. Rob's tense voice came over the radio, looking for the book about the civil rights movement. Alexander closed his eyes and prayed to any higher power listening that Helena's memories were correct and that her mother had indeed left something that could save them all. I got it. Rob's whispered voice came over the radio, filled with suppressed excitement. The wall opened. I see a small table with a box on top. Alexander felt his heart race as he discreetly watched the lookouts who remained in their positions, seemingly unconcerned with the father and daughter visiting the library. What's in the box? Alexander asked through the tiny microphone. Documents, photographs, flash drives. My God, Alexander. There's enough evidence here to bring down dozens of powerful people. Alexander closed his eyes in relief. They had finally found what Helena's mother had risked her life to protect. Grab everything and get out of there, Alexander instructed. Don't delay. Daddy, what an interesting place, Sophia exclaimed loudly, clearly fascinated by the secret. Room. It's like a hidden princess castle. Alexander smiled despite the tension. The child's innocence was providing the perfect cover for the operation. "Coming out now," Rob reported. "The wall is closed again. No one will suspect we were here." Alexander watched father and daughter emerge from the library 15 minutes later, Sophia happily swinging a small doll Rob had bought from the library's gift shop as a souvenir of the adventure. The lookouts didn't even lift their eyes. An hour later, in the safety of the car on the way to the rustic cabin, Rob opened the box they had recovered. The contents were more devastating than any of them had imagined. Elena's mother uncovered a corruption network that goes to the highest levels of the state government, Rob explained, flipping through carefully organized documents. "There's evidence of bribery, money laundering, fraudulent contracts." Alexander picked up one of the photographs, showing Marcus in a meeting with men he recognized as influential politicians and businessmen known for their dubious reputations. Marcus wasn't just a corrupt partner, Alexander murmured with growing horror. He was part of something much bigger. And Helena was the only link between this evidence and the outside world, Rob concluded. If they captured her, they could force her mother out of hiding and destroy all the evidence. Alexander felt a cold rage grow in his chest. Marcus had not only betrayed his personal trust, he had endangered the life of an innocent child to protect a criminal network that corrupted the entire power structure of the city. "There's one more thing," Rob said, pulling out a sealed envelope with Helena's name written in elegant handwriting. A letter from her mother. Alexander took the envelope with trembling hands. "Should we open it?" "I think Helena should be the first to read it," Rob wisely suggested. The rest of the drive passed in contemplative silence, both processing the magnitude of the evidence they had discovered. Alexander realized that his life had changed irreversibly, not only because of Marcus's betrayal, but because he was now irrevocably connected to the fate of Helena and her mother. When they arrived at the rustic cabin, they found Helena and Maria in the garden, the girl teaching Maria to make wildflower crowns. The scene was so peaceful and normal that Alexander felt a pang of sadness, realizing that he would soon have to break that temporary tranquility with news that would change everything. "You found it!" Helena exclaimed, running towards them as soon as she saw them approaching. Her ability to read expressions had immediately detected the success of the mission. "We found it," Alexander confirmed, kneeling to receive her in his arms. "And there's a letter from your mom for you." Helena's eyes instantly filled with tears. "Is she okay? Where is she?" "We don't know yet," Rob said gently, "but the evidence we found can lead us to her." Maria approached, noting the emotional intensity of the moment. "Do you want us to read the letter together?" Helena nodded, her small hands trembling with anxiety and hope. They all sat on the porch, Helena on Alexander's lap, as he carefully opened the envelope. The letter was written in the same elegant handwriting, but the words trembled slightly, revealing the mother's emotional state when she wrote it. "My dearest Helena," Alexander read aloud, his own voice choked with emotion. "If you are reading this, it means that the bad people found me, and I had to leave to protect you. I know you must be scared and confused, but you need to be brave, as you always have been." Helena sobbed against Alexander's chest, and he paused, reading to stroke her hair. "Keep going," Helena whispered. "The information in this box can save many innocent people, but it can also put you in terrible danger. If anything happens to me, give everything to someone you trust completely, someone who has shown true kindness, not empty words." Alexander felt a shiver, realizing that Helena had done exactly that, trusted him based on his demonstration of genuine kindness on that rainy day. "I am hidden in a safe place, but I cannot return to you while these bad people are free." Be strong, my little detective, and remember, sometimes we need to stay away from the people we love to protect them. The letter continued with specific instructions on how to find Helena's mother when it was safe, including a special code and a meeting place that only the two of them knew. "Your mother is alive," Alexander said, hugging Helena tighter. "And now we know how to find her." Helena lifted her tear-stained face, but her eyes shone with renewed determination. "So we're going to get her?" Alexander looked at Rob and Maria, seeing the same determination reflected in their faces. They had become a family united by extraordinary circumstances, and none of them would abandon the mission now. "Yes," Alexander said with absolute conviction. "We're bringing your mum home." The meeting place indicated in Helena's mother's letter was a small abandoned chapel in the hills, 30 miles from the rustic cabin. According to the instructions, they were to use a specific code, 3 short taps, 1 long, 2 short, to identify themselves as safe. Alexander drove carefully along the winding road, while Helena sat beside him, gripping her mother's letter tightly. Rob and Maria followed in another car, keeping a safe distance in case they needed an alternative escape route. "I'm nervous," Helena admitted when they spotted the chapel atop a small hill. "What if my mom isn't there?" Alexander parked discreetly, behind a grove of eucalyptus trees, from where they could observe the chapel without being seen. "Your mother is very clever, Helena. If she said she'd be here, she will be." They observed the location for 15 minutes before seeing a feminine figure cautiously emerge from the back of the chapel. Even at a distance, Alexander could see the unmistakable resemblance between mother and daughter, the same alert posture, the same wavy brown hair. "It's her!" Helena cried, trying to get out of the car before Alexander could hold her. "Wait!" Alexander said firmly. "We need to make sure it's safe." Rob appeared beside the car, having approached silently through the trees. "I checked the perimeter. I see no signs of lookouts or traps, but we can't let our guard down." Helena was practically vibrating with anticipation. "Please, can I go to her? We've been separated for so long." Alexander looked at the brave girl who had completely transformed his life and made a decision he knew was risky but necessary. "We'll go together," he said, "but slowly, and if I tell you to run, you run without questioning." They walked up the steep slope, Helena almost running ahead while Alexander followed closely. When they reached the chapel gate, Helena tapped the code exactly as her mother had instructed. The door opened immediately, revealing a thin woman of approximately 35, with intelligent eyes that reflected weeks of stress and fear. Her face lit up with indescribable joy upon seeing Helena. "My little detective," she exclaimed, kneeling to receive Helena in her arms. Alexander watched the emotional reunion between mother and daughter, feeling his own throat tighten with emotion. Seeing Helena finally safe in her mother's arms was a feeling of completeness he had never experienced. "You must be Alexander," the woman said, standing up without letting go of Helena. "I'm Carla Silva. Helena told me everything through our secret codes that we left at our meeting spots." "What do you mean?" Alexander asked, confused. Carla smiled for the first time in weeks. "Helena is much smarter than she looks. I taught her ways to leave coded messages in specific places in case we got separated. She managed to inform me about you, about Rob and Maria, about everything you did to protect her." Alexander looked at Helena with renewed admiration. "You were communicating with your mother the whole time?" Helena blushed slightly. "Only a few times. I didn't want you to worry even more." It was then that Rob appeared running up the slope, his expression alarmed. "We have trouble. Marcus found our location. There are at least 6 cars coming up the main road." Carla instantly paled. "They found me." Alexander felt panic rise, but forced his mind to remain clear. Is there another way out of this hill? There's a trail out back that leads to a secondary road, Carla said, but on foot, with Helena. I can run, Helena insisted bravely. I ran for weeks on the streets. Maria appeared on the other side of the chapel, panting. Alexander, Marcus is coming personally. I saw his car's license plate. The mention of Marcus made Alexander feel a cold rage. His ex-partner had made this situation personal by endangering an innocent child's life. Carla, Alexander said with determination, do you have a phone? We need to call the authorities who aren't compromised. Carla pulled out an old cell phone. I have contacts in Washington, D.C., federal prosecutors who are investigating the same corruption network. I call them now, tell them where we are, and that we have complete evidence about Marcus's operation. While Carla made the urgent call, Alexander picked Helena up. Let's get out of here. What if they catch us? Helena asked, her small arms wrapped around Alexander's neck. Alexander looked into the eyes of the girl who had become his heart's daughter. Then I will protect you and your mother, no matter what. They began to descend the steep trail behind the chapel, Helena in Alexander's arms, Carla running beside them, carrying the box of evidence, Rob and Maria covering the rear. Behind them, they heard the sound of engines rapidly approaching and voices shouting orders. Marcus had brought a true military operation to capture a 7-year-old girl and silence the truth. Faster, Rob urged. They've discovered we're not in the chapel. Alexander forced his legs to move faster down the rocky trail, feeling Helena cling to him more tightly. Each step took them further from the relative safety of the cars, but also closer to a possible escape. There, Maria cried, pointing to a dirt road in the valley below. If we can reach there. It was then that they heard the sound they all feared, hunting dogs barking behind them. Marcus had brought professional trackers. Alexander looked at Helena, seeing fear in her eyes for the first time since they met. In that moment he knew he would do anything, absolutely anything, to keep that brave girl safe, even if it cost him his own life. Alexander ran down the steep trail carrying Helena, his lungs burning with effort when he heard the sound. He had been waiting for helicopters approaching. Carla had managed to contact the federal prosecutors and they were arriving with reinforcements. Look, Maria cried, pointing to the sky where 3 federal helicopters appeared over the hill, quickly surrounding the area where Marcus and his men had positioned themselves. Alexander stopped running, gently setting Helena on the ground as they watched the operation unfold above them. Through the loudspeaker of one of the helicopters, an authoritative voice echoed across the mountain. Marcus Sterling, you are surrounded. Surrender immediately with your hands visible. Helena held Alexander's hand firmly. We made it. I think so, Alexander replied, feeling a mixture of relief and disbelief. The pursuit had lasted weeks, but it was ending in a matter of minutes with the arrival of the federal authorities. Carla approached, hugging Helena from the other side. The prosecutors said they had arrest warrants ready for months, just waiting for enough evidence to proceed. Rob pointed to the dirt road, where several official vehicles were rapidly approaching. It seems your box of evidence was exactly what they needed. From the top of the hill, they could hear shouts and sounds of resistance. But gradually, everything quieted down. One of the helicopters landed near them, and a man in a suit descended, identifying himself as federal prosecutor Henry Sanchez. Miss Silva, he said, greeting Carla respectfully, your evidence is extraordinary. We will be able to prosecute the entire corruption network based on the material you collected. Carla nodded, visibly relieved. And Marcus Sterling? Arrested along with 12 associates. The charges include money laundering, bribery, racketeering, and conspiracy. The prosecutor looked at Alexander. Mr. Thorne, I regret to inform you that your company will need to undergo a full investigation. Alexander nodded, surprisingly, at peace with that prospect. I understand. I will do everything necessary to cooperate. In fact, the prosecutor continued, based on Marcus's initial statements, it appears he concealed his illegal activities from you very efficiently. There will likely be no charges against you personally. Helena looked at Alexander with admiration. Does that mean you won't go to jail? Alexander knelt down to her level, smiling for the first time in days. It means we can start a new life, free from Marcus's lies and corruption. The prosecutor observed the interaction between Alexander and Helena with interest. There's another legal matter for us to discuss. Helena needs a permanent legal guardian. Carla and Alexander exchanged glances, both understanding the implication. During the weeks of separation, Helena had developed a deep paternal bond with Alexander, while Carla had realized through the coded messages that her daughter had found a genuine father figure. "Mr. Alexander," Helena said shyly, "would you like to continue being my adoptive dad even when everything is safe?" The simple question broke down the last emotional barriers Alexander had. Tears he'd repressed for decades finally streamed freely down his face. "Helena, nothing in the world would make me happier," he replied, his voice choked. Carla approached, placing a hand on Alexander's shoulder. "And I would like to invite you to be part of our family for real. Helena told me how you risked everything to protect her." Maria and Rob approached, also visibly moved. "And us?" Maria asked playfully. "Are we family now too?" Helena laughed, running to hug Maria and Rob. "Of course, we're all chosen family." The prosecutor smiled as he watched the scene. "Well, it seems all legal aspects can be easily resolved, especially considering that Mr. Thorne has clearly demonstrated his capacity and dedication to caring for Helena." In the weeks that followed, all their lives were completely transformed. Alexander sold his compromised company and used the resources to establish a foundation dedicated to protecting vulnerable children and investigating institutional corruption. The experience with Helena had shown him a much more significant purpose than simply accumulating wealth. Carla resumed her journalistic work, but now with federal protection and resources from Alexander's foundation to investigate cases of social injustice. Her courage in exposing Marcus's network had become a model case for other investigative journalists. Helena was officially adopted by Alexander, but maintained her deep connection with her biological mother. The brave girl who had survived weeks on the streets now had two parents who loved her unconditionally, and an extended family that included Maria, Rob, and even Sophia, Rob's daughter. Maria became the foundation's executive director, finally, finding a career that combined her administrative skills with her desire to make a difference in the world. Rob established an ethical investigation agency that worked exclusively for just causes. On a sunny Thursday afternoon, exactly 2 months after that first meeting in the rain, Alexander and Helena walked along the same street where it had all begun. The difference was that now they walked side by side, father and daughter, visiting the community center they had established on the site. "Mr. Alexander," Helena said, using the title she insisted on keeping out of affection, "do you regret helping me that day?" Alexander stopped walking, knelt in front of Helena, and held her small hands. "Helena, that was the most important day of my life. It was the day I discovered that my life only had meaning when I had someone to love and protect." Helena smiled, that radiant smile that had won Alexander's heart from the very first moment. "And it was the day I found out that angels exist, but sometimes they wear expensive suits and drive big cars." Alexander laughed, hugging the girl who had saved his soul as much as he had saved her life. Around them, city life continued its normal rhythm, but for both of them, the world had become a fundamentally better place. A place where the courage of a small child and the kindness of a stranger could create true miracles. 6 months had passed since that rainy afternoon that forever changed Alexander and Helena's lives. The house they now shared was a cozy home on the outskirts of the city, with a spacious garden where Helena could run freely and a well-stocked library that became her favorite refuge. This Saturday morning, Alexander watched Helena in the garden, teaching observation techniques to a group of children participating in the Foundation's programs. Her natural leadership ability and unique experience made her an extraordinary mentor for other children who had faced difficult situations. Remember, Helena patiently explained to the younger children, sometimes the adult people who seem scariest are just sad people who need help. And sometimes the people who seem kindest might be hiding bad secrets. That's why it's important to trust what you feel in here, she said, placing her hand on her chest. Alexander smiled, impressed as always with the wisdom Helena had developed. Through her experiences, she had transformed her pain into strength, her vulnerability into compassion, and her precocious intelligence into a tool to help others. Carla approached him on the porch carrying 2 cups of coffee. Their relationship had naturally evolved from mutual gratitude to a true partnership in raising Helena. They never became a romantic couple, but developed a deep friendship based on their shared love for the extraordinary girl. "Is she preparing for tomorrow's presentation?" Carla asked, referring to the event where Helena would speak to a group of entrepreneurs about social responsibility. "She says she doesn't need to prepare, that she'll speak from the heart," Alexander replied, shaking his head in admiration. "Sometimes I forget she's still a child." "A very special child," Carla agreed, who was lucky enough to find an equally special father. Maria arrived in the morning for lunch with the family, a tradition they had established on Saturdays. She brought reports on the Foundation's new projects, but also stories about the families being helped by the programs they had created. "You know," Maria said during lunch, "we've helped over 200 vulnerable children in the past 6 months, and it all started because one man decided to answer a little girl's plea for help in the rain." Rob arrived in the late afternoon with his daughter Sophia, who had become Helena's best friend. The 2 girls ran to the garden, their laughter echoing across the property as they played detective, a game Helena had invented based on her real experiences. "How's the Marcus case going?" Alexander asked Rob as they watched the girls play. "Sentenced to 20 years in prison," Rob replied with satisfaction. "And over 30 people from the network were arrested. The impact on cleaning up corruption in the city has been significant." Alexander nodded, feeling a deep sense of justice served. Marcus had paid for his crimes, but more importantly, hundreds of other innocent people were now protected from his malign influence. As night fell, when all the guests had left, Alexander tucked Helena into bed, a ritual they had both learned to value deeply. "Dad Alexander," Helena said, using the affectionate variation of the title she had created, "do you remember what you told me on the first day about finding a purpose?" "I remember. Why?" "Because today I thought that maybe you found your purpose not only in protecting me, but in protecting all children who need help." Alexander felt his throat tighten with emotion. "And you, little wise one, what is your purpose?" Helena smiled, her eyes shining with the same determination that Alexander had learned to recognize and admire. "My purpose is to show other kids that no matter how scared you are, there's always someone good in the world willing to help. We just need to be brave enough to ask." Alexander kissed Helena's forehead, whispering a silent prayer of gratitude for the transformative presence of that girl in his life. Later, sitting alone on the porch under a starry sky, Alexander reflected on the extraordinary journey that had led him from an isolated and emotionally distant businessman to a dedicated father and advocate for the vulnerable. Marcus's betrayal, however painful, had turned out to be a blessing. in disguise that freed him from an empty life to find true meaning. His corrupt company had been replaced by a foundation that touched real lives. His self-imposed loneliness had been cured by a chosen family based on genuine love. His obsessive focus on accumulating wealth had evolved into a passion for using resources to create positive change in the world. In the distance, the city lights flickered like earthly stars, reminding him of all the lives being lived at that moment, some in joy, others in suffering, but all connected by shared humanity. Alexander smiled, knowing that somewhere in that city, there were other children like Helena who needed protection, other stories of courage waiting to be written, other casual encounters that could change lives forever. The old pursuer's leather jacket, now framed in his office as a reminder, no longer represented a defeated threat, but a powerful symbol that evil only thrives when good people choose not to see, not to hear, and not to act in the face of innocent suffering. Standing up to go inside, Alexander looked one last time at Helena's room, where a nightlight cast soft shadows on the walls. Tomorrow would be another day full of possibilities, challenges, and opportunities to make a difference in the world. And it had all begun with a brave girl running in the rain and a man who chose to answer her plea for help. Sometimes, Alexander thought as he turned off the lights, the most extraordinary miracles begin with the simplest gestures of human kindness.